Hi and welcome back to Rick's Garage. So this is a continuation of the last episode. If you remember last time, I actually removed the gearbox from my Alfa GTV. In this episode, I've removed the clutch, the flywheel and the rear main seal and replacing all that, plus a few other bits and bobs which you'll see in a minute. Now before I begin, thank God I actually finished doing this job just in time, because 2 days later I actually had a bit of a nasty accident on my push bike. I am a bit of a runner and a cyclist, so yeah, come off doing 25 mile an hour, made a mess of myself and my bike, but you know, I walked away thankfully. But yeah, I'm just so glad I finished this job, because at the moment I can't do anything, so I've just been editing this video the past couple of days. So yeah, anyway, let's get into it. Here we go. See you in a mo. And very quickly, I'd just like to give a special thanks to a lot of fellow GTV owners, specifically from GTV City. Without you guys, a lot of these videos are simply not possible. Obviously, I ask lots of questions, I do lots of research. I've been speaking privately in Messenger to a lot of people in regards to the flywheel, things they've done, experiences they've had. They've shared a lot of knowledge to me. I've asked a lot of things about torque specs and things like that. So yeah, anyway, I'd just like to give a special thanks to you guys. I love you all. Thank you very much indeed. Okay guys, so what I've got here, as you can see, is a brand new clutch kit, OEM from Valio. I purchased this from Alfa Shop. I love dealing with these guys, they're absolutely brilliant. Also from them I got the new rear main seal in the form of a Cortico. I've also got a new clutch slave cylinder, a TRW1. These are only really cheap, about 30 quid on eBay, something like that. With that, I got a new circlip, got this from Totally Alpha to replace my old excessively rusted one. And I've got the new input shaft cover seal from Totally Alpha again, and this is a genuine Alpha part. And again, I've also got the new top hat or linkage bushes from Totally Alpha, OEM again. Now, the flywheel. Now, I know there's a lot of people going to be screaming out at the screen saying single mass flywheel, and you know, I totally get that, I really do. I'm not going to lie, a single mass flywheel conversion was on my list, but I spoke to a few owners who have done this. Many, or should I say most people who do this conversion don't have a problem, but somebody came forward, and then another one, and then another one, saying that once they'd done the single mass conversion they experienced a few problems, one of which being the engine management light flickering on due to the crank sensor. So yeah, at the end of the day, I'm perfectly happy with my car as a standard car with the dual mass. I don't want to ruin that. Some people said after they fitted a single mass flywheel they hated the clutch engagement. Some people say they love it, but at the end of the day, you know, it's not something that I really want to sacrifice the way my car drives. I really like it as a standard car. So yeah, that was the decider for me. It was a personal choice, and this is what I've decided to stick with. Now, as you can see, I've had the flywheel resurfaced, should I say. There's not many people that would touch a dual mass flywheel for obvious reasons. But I found a specialist near myself who had taken on this job. He actually refaced it and he removed 1/10 of an inch, which equates to, what is it, about 1/4 of a millimetre. This is what the flywheel looked like before. As you can see, lots of scorching, lots of burn marks, but no scrapes, indentations of the old clutch. It's good to go. I've tested the flywheel, there's no excessive movement in it. It's just worth saving, and that's what I've decided to do. So yeah, really happy, and without further ado, let's get on to the job. Okay, so getting straight into it, first of all, obviously we need to remove the clutch, so we just unbolt the pressure plate. So off comes the clutch and pressure plate. The clutch is in actually, it's not too bad condition, to be honest. The pressure plate does have some wear, as does the surface of the flywheel, but no grooves, no indentations. It's all just burnt scorch marks, as to be expected really. So out comes the bolts holding on the flywheel. Now unfortunately for me, my cordless impact ran out of battery, so out came Big Bertha again to save the day. The good old 240 volt impact wrench. It's overkill for most things, but it's always there as a backup, and it does everything just brilliantly well for me, to be honest. Okay, so off comes the flywheel to reveal the rear main seal, and as you can see straight away, there's oil pretty much everywhere. It's not terribly bad, but there is clearly oil seepage from around the rear main seal. But I think it's also fair to say that there's more than one oil leak going on here. As you can see, there's oil coming from up above, but I've got a good idea of what that is. But yeah, oil pretty much everywhere, and I think it would be a good time to give everything a good clean up. So as always, I'm using the Bilthamber Surfex HD degreaser again. You know how much I love this stuff if you've viewed my other videos. I'm actually using a very weak mixture here because I've got very little left. I've actually got some more on order to do the bell housing. I buy this stuff in 5 litres at a time, and obviously you can dilute it. Okay, so on to removal of the rear main seal. I actually used a very popular idea of drilling a pilot hole straight into the rear main seal, putting a screw into it and then pulling on the screw to pull out the seal. It was very tight. It actually took me a couple of holes and a couple of screws to pull it out, but eventually it came out without too much struggle. And once that is out, I just spray a very small amount of brake cleaner to give it a good clean around the crank and the surrounding contact surfaces ready for the new seal. Now, as I've already mentioned, the rear main seal I'm using is a Cortico. I bought this from Alfa Shop, and prior to fitting I actually rang them to ask should I put any kind of lubrication on this seal at all, maybe a little smear of oil on the inside, but they said no, fit the seal exactly how it is, bone dry, straight out of the box. So I'm going to take their advice and do just that. Now, as you would expect, the seal is very tight going on around the crank. It can be a little bit awkward to get it started and get it going on straight, but once you do, it does knock back perfectly fine. And as you can see, I'm using a soft dead plow hammer here, just to make sure I don't damage anything, particularly the engine block. Now, once I knocked it in flush, I then used the old seal to knock it back a little bit further where it needs to be. I'm just copying off my old seal and putting it in the exact same position. Okay, so that's the rear main done. Now obviously it's time to fit the flywheel. Now I'm fitting this flywheel, and or should I say refitting the flywheel in the exact same position as it was before I took it off, just to ensure there's no problems. And I'm actually fitting the flywheel bolts using thread locker. Now, as I'm putting these bolts in, you will notice that I'm putting them in to begin with in no particular order, just to get them going. Then obviously I tighten them all down in a star pattern to make sure that they're all tightened down evenly, and then obviously I torque them down as well in a star pattern. Obviously this is very important. Okay, so now you will notice I'm using the electric ratchet. This isn't to tighten the bolts up, it's just to get them going in for quickness. There's no torque going through this at all whatsoever. So all the bolts are in, and then what I did is I went round and tightened them all down. And here I am just torquing them all up, and the torque setting for the dual mass flywheel is 150 Newton meters. Okay, so here's the new clutch ready to go on. You will notice that the centre sticks out further on one side. Obviously that side goes towards the flywheel. So the bolts holding on the pressure plate are a T40 Torx, and also with those bolts you need to use thread locker again. Okay, so all those bolts are in place, but obviously before you tighten those down, you now need to centre the clutch. You can obviously use a clutch aligning tool for this, but what I'm doing, which is just as good, is using a long socket with an extension and followed by some visual checks. So once you're happy, you can then tighten all these down, and the torque setting for these is 30 Newton meters. Okay, so there you go. That's the rear main seal sorted, all the oil leaks cleaned up, the dual mass flywheel is fitted, and so is the new clutch. So now it's time to move on to the gearbox and give it all a good clean. And believe me, it really needs it. So here we are with the very oily gearbox. As you can see, lots and lots of oil absolutely everywhere. Now again, the good old Biltamba Surfex HD, and I'm actually using this stuff neat right now. I've just had a delivery of a new batch. So right now is just a light clean, and I'm just using a small pressure sprayer to rinse it all off. I then cover up the openings at the differential just to make sure no water gets inside, and also you'll notice the electrical connection on top is covered over. Then what I do is give everything a good blast. I didn't go too heavy in there with the jet wash, just enough really, just to give it a quick once over. I'm sure you'll agree it's all looking much better now. And this is the main shaft seal that we'll be replacing. Okay, so now we're going to tackle that main input shaft seal. Now I got this part, this genuine Alfa Romeo part from Totally Alfa, thank you very much. Now these bolts are, you know, they're not very tight at all. There's not much torque in them at all. Maybe 20 Newton meters, 30 absolute max. But yeah, these come out very easily. There's a washer behind each bolt as well. And then once you remove those bolts, this pulls out very easily. Now as always, giving the contact surfaces for the new seals a good clean, make sure there's nothing stuck on there. And then before I fit it, I just compare it with the old one, and it is indeed exactly the same. Now this slides over the input shaft very easily, and then when it gets to the end, it does need a bit of a push. And then once that's in, you can proceed to put each bolt in. And then what I did is put them all in by hand. And then following that, I actually tighten them up gradually, each a little bit at a time, just to make sure that seal is seating nicely. Okay, now the clutch release bearing. This is a very important bit. See this little black plastic conical ring? Now that actually needs to be over that retaining clip, because what that is there for is to compress the clip to make sure that it goes inside the pressure plate with ease, and when it gets pushed in, that plastic seal then pushes back. Now there's a good chance if and when you buy a new clutch kit, this ring, just like mine was, won't be over that retaining clip, so that's what you need to do. And I'm sliding my release bearing over the shaft seal cover with some good old copper grease. And whilst you're at it, you might want to put a little bit of grease on the fork too. I almost forgot. And there you go, that's in, nice and smooth, probably one of the easiest jobs you can do. Okay, so before you do the top hat pushes, you just want to make a note of the position of the linkage. You want to make sure it goes back in the same way. It's pretty much straight to the casing, as you can see here, but it's not absolutely essential, to be honest, because there's only one way, or kind of one way it can go back in, which you'll see in a moment. So these are the new bushes, nothing special about them really, just plastic. So the first thing you're going to want to do is remove this nut on the end, then you can just pull the linkage straight out. So off comes the nut, and behind that should be a single washer. And then the linkage should pull straight out without any bother at all really. Mine isn't too bad, but I'll give it a little bit of a clean up. Now this part of the linkage, it's not held on by anything over the rubber hat. It literally just hooks on underneath the pin. As you can see right here, a little bit of a close-up in a minute. So yeah, it just hooks underneath that pin, and that's all there is to it. Okay, so rather than trying to trying to grab hold of the bushes with your fingers, I just knocked them out lightly with a screwdriver. They come out very, very easily. Now whilst I'm cleaning out the old grease, as you can see, it's just normal grease that's been used. I suppose you could use copper grease, maybe that's better, but me being me, I chose to stick with the grease that was originally used. Okay, now with the other half of the linkage, as you can see, it's not perfectly round. There are two flat sides in there, so as long as you don't put it in completely upside down, you can't really go wrong. Okay, so that's almost everything fitted onto the gearbox, everything done, and it's ready to go back in. The only thing I'm going to replace in the future is the actual rubber boot, the top hat boot, whatever you want to call it. Mine's quite split, but it's still kind of doing its job. Now, I'm not going to do a video fitting the gearbox. I'm going to keep it very, very brief because it's pretty much the reverse of taking it out. Otherwise, this video would just be too long, longer than it already is. So yeah, in it went. It wasn't too much trouble, little bit fiddly. I thought I'd have trouble putting the gearbox on top of the trolley jack because you've not got the ability to rotate it. But what I did instead is put it up to the flywheel, inserted it a little bit. If I thought it wasn't in, then I just turned the flywheel manually until I thought it was right. But yeah, other than that, it went on pretty okay, to be honest. This wooden table, which is fixed on top of my jack, there was quite a little bit of movement in that, which helped quite a bit. So as you can see, we're almost there, and then bingo, she's in, a few bolts in quick. Pretty pleased with that. Now, as you might remember from my last video, I had to unbolt my slave cylinder at the bracket because the circlip and the slave cylinder itself was completely seized in. But I got the circlip off. Now what I'm going to do is just bolt it back onto the gearbox to help keep it still, unplug the pipework, and then hopefully that should be it. Now, as I say, it was very, very stiff coming out. Took about 5 minutes, but eventually I got it out. It was a right swine, not going to lie. As you can see, it's seen better days. So in with the new slave cylinder. Just unscrew that plug, and I actually put a little bit of copper grease on it so it doesn't seize in again, hopefully, and there is a locating tab on that so you can't really put it in the wrong way. Plumbed it in, and there you go. So there you go, guys, job done, thank you God. This was just a major hurdle. I mean, I was preparing to put all my subframe and suspension and brakes and getting everything back together, but then this came along. But you know, in the end, I'm glad I've done it, glad I've bit the bullet. You know, it's just for peace of mind getting that rear main seal done. Now obviously it is worth mentioning, a lot of people are thinking, what about the cigarette seals? And you know, mine look okay, so I am hoping I can get away with it. They didn't appear to be leaking, but again, as I do my own labour, my own jobs, if in the future it does need to come off, then I will do those. That is another job in itself, removing the sump and everything. But yeah, for now, I've decided to leave those, just do the rear main seal and everything backwards. So yeah, anyway, hope you enjoyed the video, and I shall see you in the next one. Stay safe, guys. See you soon.